Hello everybody, welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I really do appreciate it. We are back and better than ever talking about a lot of very interesting stories. First, some good news. Was this our last COVID surge? It is certainly possible to take a look at some of the data that we are seeing right now. Things are looking very, very good in the COVID space. Vaccinations increasing after, a pretty big surge, a pretty significant surge over the summer, mostly due to some unvaccinated people. We're going to take a look at some of the evidence on that. Also, following a massive strike wave, especially with John Deere workers, but also the IATSE workers in Hollywood. Everyone going on strike. We're going to be specifically telling you, bringing up to speed with the help of Jonah Furman's reporting about some of what we are seeing in John Deere, especially in the Midwest, as over 10,000 workers go on strike. Meanwhile, Katie Couric now literally admitting in her book, as she, this is a pretty sad sign of someone who is quite irrelevant, because no self-respecting journalist would probably ever admit this, that she was editing RBG's answers to make RBG look better, especially in relation to her comments in 2016 about Colin Kaepernick's protests. Also, interesting conversation to react to on First Take, of all places, with the world's best broadcaster, Stephen A. Smith, taking Kyrie Irving to task about his vaccination stance. We'll break it down. All right, so we're starting off with this in the New York Times here today. After a pretty brutal summer surge, mostly among the unvaccinated, driven obviously by the Delta variant, the coronavirus is again in retreat. 90,000 new infections a day in the United States at the moment, which is about 40% down since August. Hospitalizations and deaths are following too. The situation in Alaska right now is actually particularly bad, but nationally the trend is clear and the hopes are rising. The worst is finally behind us once again. And of course, we've seen new variants. We've seen a bunch of, every time we think we're getting closer, it kind of goes away. The vaccination really should have put the kibosh on big COVID cases by now, especially by the summer. But obviously the Delta variant threw a wrench in those plans. Over 2 years, the pandemic has crashed over the country in waves, inundating hospitals and then receding, only to return after Americans let their guard down. It is difficult to tease apart the reason the virus ebbs and flows in this way, and harder to predict for the future. But as winter looms, there are real reasons for optimism. Nearly 70% of adults are now fully vaccinated, and children under 12 are likely to be eligible for their shots in the matter of weeks. Federal regulators could also authorized the first antiviral pill for COVID-19, a better, much more safe option for people who may have fears on vaccinations. But, another very interesting thing going on that I personally will be keeping an eye on is the stuff, with this pill. I've heard, it can be a little bit scary. I personally would trust the pill almost less than the vaccine, because what I've heard about the way, Merck's been kind of rushing through it, and, some of the research there does not seem to be all the best. But again, I think if the FDA approves it, obviously, it's definitely worth a look into for sure. Don't want to be, I'm starting a new anti-pillar society. No, definitely worth looking into there for sure once the FDA approves it, if they do. We are definitely hands down in a better place than we were last year, that's for sure, said Nahid Bahadelia, the director of the Center for Emerging Infectious Diseases Policy and Research at Boston University. But the pandemic is not over yet, scientists caution. Nearly 2,000 Americans are still dying every day, and it was an incredible amount, and another winter surge is plausible, given how many Americans remain unvaccinated and how much remains unknown. It is still soon to abandon basic precautions, such as mask wearing and social distancing and things like that. When the first wave of coronavirus cases hit the United States in early 2020, there was still no COVID vaccine. Essentially, no one was immune to the virus. The only way to flatten the proverbial curve was to change individual behavior. This is what the first round of stay-at-home orders, business closures, and mask mandates and bans on large gatherings aim to do. There's still debate over which of those matters was most effective, but numerous studies suggest that collectively they made a difference, keeping people at home and curbing the growth of case numbers. These policies, combined with the voluntary social distancing, most likely helped bring the early surges to an end, researchers said. Eventually, cases would rise again and similar patterns would play out. Businesses and local governments would re-implement restrictions while people who had been venturing out in the world again would hunker down and mask up. During last winter's surge, for instance, the percentage of Americans who reported going to bars or restaurants or attending large events declined, according to the United States COVID-19 Trends and Impact Survey, which has surveyed an daily average of 44,000 Facebook users since April 2020. The curve is shaped by public awareness. We are sort of lurching between crisis and complacency. And you really also, I think, certain fatigue. It's like everyone has that COVID fatigue. The question is, how much are you paying attention to the rules and regulations around you, and really how much do you need to pay attention? For a lot of people in this country, I think, especially people who are living kind of, highly vaccinated areas, less or really less populated areas, do not have that much to worry about because COVID really is just not playing a part in my life. Where I am right now is definitely playing a part in my life because I'm with a bunch of people, and if you're in a densely populated area where there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of liability also at stake, you're obviously going to have to do a bit more work around the COVID thing. I have to wear a mask, whenever I kind of go, bring a mask whenever I want to go out and really do something, because it's a heavily populated area where I am, but. Anyway, that is a kind of my experience with it. But before, a few months ago, I was in a completely different situation where I was not wearing a mask regularly whatsoever. So it's nice. But I think I think eventually, it will trend more into that direction. More people probably get vaccinated. I do think we're going in a much better direction because things are, the social interactions by and large are still happening. In mid-July, 23% of Americans said they always wore a mask in public, the lowest percentage since March 2020. By August 31st, the peak of the Delta wave, the figure had risen to 41%, though it remained far below the 77% of people who reported wearing masks during the winter surge. So obviously the worst day ever actually was January the 7th, with about 237,000 cases a day, and then now we are pretty much declining to, one of the lower points we've ever had, which is, we're about halfway there. We're halfway down the mountain from where we were in the past. Yeah, so that's pretty much what we are looking at here. Obviously, looking at a very interesting weather dynamic playing a bit of a fact. As this is kind of being called a shoulder season, says David O'Connor, a virologist at UW-Madison, saying we're in the middle of a shoulder season where it's cooler in the south than it is in the middle of the summer, and it's warmer definitely in the north than it is in the middle of the winter. That is for sure. And of course, some of the current biggest virus hotspots at the moment are in places like Alaska and Minnesota, where even cooler temperatures may be sending people back inside. All right, we got a lot of stuff to get to, so we're going to go to our next story here, talking about some unprecedented labor action right now at the moment. Jonah Furman, definitely a guy to follow if you're on Twitter about this. You want to stay informed. It really is remarkable to see there are so few labor reporters in the country at the moment now that really people doing great work like Jonah Furman at Labor Notes is getting some of the well-deserved plaudits and TV appearances and things like that that are very cool to see. And really just unprecedented amount of strike action going on all across the country, all different industries. One of the biggest ones is John Deere. This goes through here, and it started Thursday, the first minute of Thursday, the 14th. So it has been very interesting, these dynamics here. So pretty much it started in early September where Deere presented a disastrously bad first offer to the membership. They likely wanted to lower expectations by super lowballing them, but ended pissing off everybody, and the members authorized a strike by 99%. So pretty much what the big issue was that newer workers would just not be put on the same pay scale as older workers. People who have been here for like 20, 30 years, they were just not getting the same benefits, time off pay, all that stuff. And that was becoming a big problem because you're kind of like segregating the workplace. So They got to the edge of a strike on October 1st, but at the very last second, the UAW and Deere announced an extension, averting a strike and further pissing off the members because people just, they want a little bit more from their union here, and they seemed like they were able to get it. On Sunday, members shocked both the union and the company by rejecting the contract by a whopping 90%, with 90% of the members voting. So a huge, huge blow. So, the union put this out. They put this contract out like they were going to, settle, and it seemed like another one of the very disappointing strings of things that have been going on, especially for the UAW, and after their big corruption scandal a few years ago. Management continued to threaten workers and pressure them to settle, while non-union salaried workers began leaking documents to labor notes and expressing their support of the union members' cause. So that's a good sign there. And this comes in UAW drama here, as we are seeing a national referendum in the UAW on direct elections for top union officers coming against the corruption scandal. And, people, they want a little bit more from their union. They're just simply saying that they want to see a lot more action. They want to see a lot more, militancy and aggression. And they are definitely getting it. So this corporate profits are against stagnating wages. People are mad about that. Decades of two-tier concessionary contracts coming home to roost. This is the two-tier, older workers on one better tier, and younger, more newer workers on the older tier. And of course, the tight labor market in the pandemic. A member revolt against the status quo, tacitly endorsed by the union leaders here, that are being a lot of people's trying to get angry about that. But yeah, let's take a look at what is going on here. So they announced it, so they had this deadline, and of course Deere is in the midst of this, literally its most profitable year ever. A lot of people want to buy tractors and starting farms, whatever I don't know. The farm equipment manufacturer expects to rake in $5.7 to $5.9 billion net income this year, far exceeding its previous high of $3.5 billion in 2013. They're killing it, and just cannot, by any circumstances, imagine paying their workers the same as they pay their older workers here. UAW members in Deere described rowdy scenes from at least some of their 9 local meetings. At Waterloo, Iowa, Local 38, several of the members wrote "fuck no" on their t-shirts. They used the uncensored version of the microphone. One member said the only thing the agreement was good for was wiping my ass. Members of the negotiating committee told members they started with a 24% wage increase that got whittled down to 11 to 12% over 6 years. In years 2, 4, and 6, workers received lump sum payments equivalent to 2% of their wages in lieu of raises. Workers also booed a representative of the UAW International, according to Des Moines Register. Members yelled at him about a 2018 vote when union delegates approved a 31% pay hike for UAW leaders. That is something that they were not happy about. In Ottumwa, many members simply filed in, vote no, and left. They knew they were voting no, but they didn't want to sit there and listen to the bullshit. There's we don't want to hear all this propagating from, the well-paid international leaders. We want to, get some action going. In the Quad Cities, the 4-city region of southeastern Iowa and northwestern Illinois is home to the Deere headquarters and several Deere plants. Local TV news spoke to workers who described the meeting as chaos, but the big surprise here was the big numbers. By late morning, it was clear to many members the contract was going down. Even so, the 90% figure far exceeded most expectations. The UAW announced a new strike deadline of, Wednesday, 11:59, and that obviously has passed. According to the internal company email seen by Labor Notes, the company has tapped white-collar employees in order to cast a broader net to fill critical factory positions in case of a work stoppage. According to one of these workers, the numbers of them had to go out and buy steel-toed boots in preparation for their strike-breaking deployment. So it is very, very interesting to see their strategy here. They're trying to get the white-collar guys, and I'm sure a lot of the workers on strike are going to get a huge kick out of seeing these office workers trying to go down into the plant and actually get to work. Members reported a pretty combative mood on the job this morning. Anecdotally, workers report a spike in sick-outs. Those who are working are conscious that the more Deere can produce before a strike, the more inventory it can rely on to sustain profits during a work stoppage. So they don't want to give them any more fuel when they kind of know what's going to happen. So a strike at Deere would be the largest private sector walkout since 49,000 UAW members struck at GM for 41 days in 2019. The contract rejection comes as UAW members prepare to vote later this month on a referendum on whether to directly elect the union's top officers again. And we are seeing some other stuff going on. There was a very interesting, again, Jonah Furman, the absolute person to go for this. A lot of interesting stuff going on. There's a very cool situation going on in the Kellogg factory. I don't know exactly where. It's the Kellogg's plant in Omaha, Nebraska. And we're seeing bikers, working with the union members. Biker gangs coming out to the back entrance of the Kellogg factory, stopping scabs from coming in. Love to see those videos of, trucks turning around and honking the horns and then everyone else on the picket lines cheering. Always good to see and great to see workers of all backgrounds, even if it is people who, otherwise sympathetic to unions, people in, liberal areas may feel a little bit uncomfortable because all, these people who you would, normally associate with people going to Trump rallies, big white, burly white guys, that makes a lot of people, I think very wrongly, uncomfortable. But, this kind of militancy is good wherever you can get it. And it's great to see the kind of cooperation happening from, workers of all colors, of all backgrounds, and even some bikers as well. There's an interesting, iron workers in Pennsylvania getting a little bit pissed off. There's an interesting situation going on with the Teamsters union election, and a really interesting, path for militancy in the Teamsters right now, which is going to be interesting. I'm going to be following that more in the future. So we got Kellogg's, we got Deere, we got strikes going on all over the country. So very, very exciting to follow. Coming up next, a famous journalist edited an interview with a famous Supreme Court justice to, quote, protect her because she didn't understand the question. That's next.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our segment to tell you all about what's going on here on the Spencer Walsh Radio Network this summer. We do, as I'm sure you know, have a great lineup available for you. We, of course, start with our flagship show, Newsflash, all new Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Uncultured, irregularly back every Saturday with live music and sports analysis with my co-host for the summer, Bennett Laxton. Hidden History will be brand new every Thursday on a bit of a hiatus, but will return shortly. It's the summer of podcasting. It's the summer of sounds. All you got to do is just keep listening wherever you get your podcasts, always here on the Spencer Walsh Radio Network.
So a really interesting book coming out here by Katie Couric, obviously the former journalist, broadcaster in a lot of different places. And she interviewed in 2016 Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg got a lot of trouble back then for comments that she made both about Trump and Colin Kaepernick, who's obviously all the rage with the protests going on at the time. And apparently she made some pretty comments that didn't make a cut because Katie Couric was like, yeah, you don't want to say this, I'm cutting this out. So she, you can get the clue in why she's revealing this. Really, if you're any kind of self-respecting journalist, like, you don't want to reveal that you edited out bad look comments in, your subject's interview. That's just gross journalistic behavior. And I think she was like, yeah, I'm a big RBG fan. What do you want? It's really, really remarkable. This is supposed to be one of the country's most respected journalists. The effort was, the editing done, she literally, admitting this here, it was in the New York Post, the editing was done in an effort to protect the late Supreme Court Justice, Couric wrote in her memoir, which was obtained by the Post. She revealed in Going There, which is out on October 26th, I don't think I'm going to be buying that book, that she felt that Ginsburg, who was 83 at the time of the interview, may have not gotten what Couric was totally asking her, as first reported by the Mail. So, include the question, make people make their own judgment. It's just that simple. You just don't cut out literally what people say. She was elderly and probably didn't understand the question, Couric explained in the 500-page Scorched Earth biography, in which no colleague, ex-boyfriend, or acquaintance is safe from the Today host's brutal score settling. So apparently, this definitely seems to be like a big, struggle for relevance. Like, I mean, I don't know what her finances are like. I mean, she's been a journalist for a long time. She's been in a lot of big things. Like, why not just settle down, have a nice, comfortable retirement life? You don't have to, like, kind of embarrass yourself like this. It's like, for, a big, whole bunch of money in a book. Like this is just very, very sad to see. Putting all these juicy details in there just clearly so that people, it gets more names in the head, or gets more time in the headlines, more sales, all that stuff. So while the interview that was eventually published by Yahoo News, and again, another instance of where she's been over the past 5-6 years, did include Ginsburg saying that she believes that not standing the national anthem as an act of protest is dumb and disrespectful. It did not include her strongest condemnations of the act, according to Couric. Not standing for the anthem shows a, quote, contempt for a government that has made it possible for their parents and grandparents to live a decent life, which they probably could not have lived in the places they came from. Like Colin Kaepernick, I'm pretty sure he's American. A lot of people doing this, they're American. Like, what, again, kind of awful comments there by Ginsburg. But which they probably could not have lived in the places they came from. As they became older, they realized this was youthful folly, and that's why education is so important, Ginsburg told Couric at the time. I think it's a terrible thing to do, but I wouldn't lock a person up for doing it. I would point out how ridiculous it seems to me to do such an act, which, again, it's her right to do that, but, again, kind of ridiculous, comments from her, and also really, again, points to just really crazy nature of how all these liberals made such a big deal out of, like, putting her. I'm sure there's been murals made of her being put up, I know I've seen it, like, members of the squad or whatever being put up to RBG, like, if RBG probably doesn't feel that comfortable around, certain people, let's just say she's been known to have some old-fashioned opinions when it comes to, race and in more modern developments that have taken place throughout her, obviously she's dead now, but her very long life. And that is very, very clear to see. Like, she's obviously been a big crusader for, women's rights, and, upper-class white suburban women have made a big, big idol of her, but they went back to brunch, and that has been a big, shift in politics that has a lot wider consequences than this, but really just embarrassing for both of them here, and embarrassing for all the people who tried to make it such a big, big idol out of somebody like RBG, because she was never this kind of person. She was never someone who was, like, really hard, cared about, the little guy, quote unquote, that just was never someone. Not a person she was. She Couric, she literally wrote she was a, quote, big RBG fan, and again, clearly here, so was everybody else in the media for, like, the past 4 years. Nobody, like, I almost felt uncomfortable, like, I still did, obviously, you go back and listen to the show, but bringing up the fact that she didn't retire when she could have under Obama, because people would yell at me, like, oh, she's such a hero, like, all the things she did for women's rights, no, she's someone who, obviously she did, she wrote the pioneering on the basis of sex Supreme Court decision, but she's also someone who spent a lot of time, upholding the, the status quo in a slightly liberal way for the Supreme Court, and then just kind of got on to receive a whole bunch of just random adulation in later life with the notorious RBG kind of merch line that she's been kind of hamstrung into. And, she apparently Couric apparently felt protective of her, and the controversy of the comments would likely embroil her in. Writing in a book, she lost a lot of sleep and felt extremely conflicted over deciding whether or not she should include Ginsburg's comments. Full thoughts on the matter. As well, the day after the interview, the Supreme Court's head of public affairs emailed Couric to say Ginsburg had misspoken and requested the comments on the matter be removed from the piece. Couric eventually did mostly as they requested. So again, not someone I would want interviewing anybody who, actually wanted answers from, to say the least. Like, really big blow to her, journalistic credibility. But nevertheless, it is what it is. All right. Back in 20 seconds to talk about this very interesting vaccination conversation that took place over on ESPN.
Buckingham Palace has announced the death of His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh.
It's news flash.
Yeah, we'll be updating news those soon enough. You gotta get those updated. Anyway, we're talking about this very interesting, probably the best piece of talk television anywhere. Sports or news, got to be First Take. You got Stephen A. Smith, formerly obviously Skip Bayless. That was the heyday. But now Max Kellerman is on. I don't know. It was lineup between them. It's pretty much a sports debate show with probably the best broadcaster out right now, Stephen A. Smith. And it's all over Kyrie Irving and this really interesting situation that's going, because a lot of people, they defended him around with Boston because he was very kind of like a social justice focused player and leading the, NBA charge on Black Lives Matter. And I really don't quite know what's happened. Maybe got off on some sort of real hippie. I don't believe in medicine. I don't even know. It's just really, I have not bothered to focus on the justifications here. But it seems like a lot of sports people, just pretty much a lot of NBA people especially, have been just been really struggling to sugarcoat it in sports ways, just to really process how crazy Kyrie's now new anti-vax stance is. And this is some of the discussion of how it played out on First Take. It's a really interesting kind of window into how America's kind of processing this vaccination drive. Now, why not learn a little bit more about what's going on with Kyrie? And, I think this is going to influence a lot of people's perceptions, by the way, about the vaccine, because people follow sports and listen to Kyrie Irving more than listen to someone like Joe Biden.
Stephen A., should our position on Kyrie change?
Yes, it should change in regards to Kyrie. It should be even worse than we originally imagined. I have to be, and I try to be, incredibly careful, fellas, in terms of I try to focus on what you do, not who you are. People make mistakes. None of us are flawless. All of us have made mistakes. We'll continue to make mistakes. None of us are perfect, and we get all of that. But I've been covering the NBA now for almost 25 years. I mean, this is some of the stupidest nonsense I've ever seen. Just flat out stupid. So let me get this straight. So if the reports are true, because we don't know whether they are or not, okay, but let's give credit to Sham and others who have reported this. Mm-hmm. It is what it.
But pretty much all reports are kind of inside knowledge supporting pretty much the same thing, that Irving is not going to get the vaccine.
Let's go with that, okay? If it is true, Jay, if it is true, Marcus, so you don't have a problem with taking the vaccine, your position is that you're going to sit up there and compromise the championship aspirations of an organization you signed on to represent. You coaxed Kevin Durant into signing on to represent. You played the role in coaxing James Harden into signing on to represent. You're going to compromise all of that because you want to give a voice to the voiceless. Really? And how is that going to work out for you, Kyrie Irving? You're going to disappear from the game of basketball? Who the hell is going to be interested in what you have to say when you have proven that you can't even be trusted enough to do your damn job? A job you volunteered for. This ain't the military where you were drafted. You chose to play basketball. You chose to enter the NBA. You chose to sign that contract as a free agent to go to the Brooklyn Nets. You chose Brooklyn as your destination. You chose the Nets franchise to represent. You asked KD and James Harden to come on board with you in Brooklyn to establish your own legacy. And then
yeah, and that's getting a little heated. You gotta love Stephen A. Smith, that's kind of how he is, but a really kind of insane situation there. Thinking about the logic, the process of the logic, he, caring about, his legacy. All the NBA players care about that, and all the just loads, industrial tons of shit that's been talked about him in the NBA about oh, he can't win, he's a weirdo loser, he's incredibly clutch with LeBron and the Cavs and all that in the run up, especially their championship in 2016. But the disastrous 2 to 3 years he had on the Celtics, and just going from there and just losing all his blatantly just kind of losing all its credibility. And then with some of the Black Lives Matter activism stuff, I kind of like respect, bringing the change, saying like uncomfortable things the league doesn't want to hear. But just again, missing games over this, it really just like sets kind of a horrible example. And it's just like, you did this, and the vaccine, it's always already been like clearly proven to be like incredibly effective. Not only does it set an example, but it's just like so just blatantly illogical. Like, does he really believe there's a lot of people giving this up who are just like really misinformed. Like, I don't think he did say he was like a flat earther for a bit, but I mean how are there not just like people in his life who can say like, think about what you're giving up here by not doing it, or just in saying this? Like, think about like all, not just the money, but the championship, like everything you've ever worked your whole life for this. Like, if that's what he wants to give that up, that's what he's going to do. But it is really quite surreal to see something like that happen, and such a public player making such a big decision with just seemingly nothing to gain. He's just, and Stephen A is completely right. Like, no one's gonna have to care about like his bold vaccine activism, other than the people who are already anti-vax, which is a kind of like smaller and smaller population. As more people get vaccinated now, but it is very, very clear that this is going to be a big, probably a very interesting story to watch, because people, if you're talking about what influences like public opinion, especially in areas where like like a lot of people watch basketball, like. Kyrie's getting vaccinated. That may like seriously convince someone, like better than, Dr. Fauci going on some sort of like big show and talking to the millennials as he has tried to do. All right, that's it for us. We will be back soon. Thank you very much.